The grand mansion on Hillcrest Avenue stood like a castle among the other homes, its windows gleaming in the afternoon sun. Inside those walls, Elena Vasquez moved quietly from room to room, her cleaning cart rolling softly across the marble floors. For 3 years she had worked here, dusting the shelves filled with books nobody read and polishing surfaces nobody touched. The owner of this palace hardly noticed her existence. Elena wiped her forehead with the back of her hand and checked her watch. 3 more hours until she could go home. Her daughter Rosa would be finishing her homework by now, probably sitting at their small kitchen table, surrounded by textbooks and college brochures. The thought brought a smile to Elena's tired face. "When you finish university," Elena often told Rosa, "you'll never have to clean other people's messes." Rosa would always hug her mother and say, "Everything I am is because of you, Mama." The vacuum hummed as Elena moved it across the thick carpet of the East Wing. She had a system for cleaning this massive house. Start at the top floor and work down, moving clockwise through each room. Today she would finish with the grand living room where Richard Hammond, the tech mogul who owned the mansion, was hosting some fancy dinner party. Richard Hammond had made his fortune developing security software. His face appeared on business magazines and his name came up in news stories about the richest people in the country. To Elena, he was simply the man who barely looked at her when giving instructions through his house manager. "Make sure you're finished before the guests arrive," the house manager had told her that morning. "Mr. Hammond doesn't want the help visible during his dinner." Elena had nodded, used to being invisible. It paid well, better than her previous cleaning jobs, and the steady income helped cover Rosa's college application fees and their small apartment rent. As evening approached, Elena hurried to finish the living room. The grand piano stood in the center like a shiny black island, surrounded by elegant furniture. She dusted it carefully, admiring its beauty without touching the keys. Behind her, staff from the catering company bustled around, setting up for the dinner party. 10 minutes until guests arrive, called the event coordinator, a slim woman with a clipboard who had been pacing the floor all afternoon. Elena quickened her pace, wiping down the last of the glass display cases. The room sparkled under the crystal chandeliers. She had just started to gather her cleaning supplies when the front door opened, and Richard Hammond strode in, talking loudly on his phone. "I don't care what the board thinks," he was saying, his voice sharp with irritation. "Tell them we're moving forward with the acquisition whether they like it or not." He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and the kind of tan that came from expensive vacations. His tailored suit probably cost more than Elena earned in 3 months. He didn't glance her way as he crossed the room, still arguing with someone on the phone. Elena kept her head down and continued collecting her things. She had learned long ago that the best way to avoid trouble was to blend into the background. "Fine," Hammond snapped into his phone. "We'll discuss it tomorrow." He hung up and threw the phone onto a nearby couch, then noticed Elena for the first time. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Aren't you done yet?" "Yes, sir," Elena said quietly. "Just finishing up now." He made a dismissive gesture and walked to the bar cart in the corner, pouring himself a drink. The amber liquid splashed into a crystal glass as the doorbell rang. The first guests had arrived. Elena hurried to push her cart toward the service hallway, but Hammond's voice stopped her. "Leave that and help the caterers serve drinks," he ordered without looking at her. "We're short-staffed tonight." She hesitated, surprised by the request. "Sir, I'm not—" "Just do it," he cut her off, downing his drink in one gulp. "There's a serving jacket in the kitchen. The pay will be the same." Elena nodded and slipped away to the kitchen where the catering staff worked frantically to prepare the final touches on elegant appetizers. The head chef glanced at her with sympathy when she explained the situation. "Here," he said, handing her a black serving jacket. "Just smile, offer drinks, and try to stay out of his way. He seems in a mood tonight." Within minutes, Elena found herself holding a tray of champagne flutes as the living room filled with Hammond's guests. They were all like him, expensively dressed, loud with confidence, discussing money and business deals as if they were talking about the weather. None of them looked at her face as they took glasses from her tray. From snippets of conversation, Elena gathered that these were potential investors for Hammond's newest venture. Something about artificial intelligence and global markets, words that floated above her head as she moved through the crowd. "Richard, darling," called a woman with diamonds dripping from her ears. "This house is still as magnificent as ever. When are you going to settle down and find someone to share it with?" Hammond laughed, his earlier anger seemingly forgotten. Why ruin a good thing, Vivian? Besides, who has the time? More guests arrived, and soon the room buzzed with conversation. Elena kept her tray full, moving back and forth from the kitchen with practiced efficiency. Years of balancing multiple jobs had given her a strength and stamina that served her well tonight. As she passed the grand piano, a well-dressed older man stopped her. "Gorgeous instrument," he commented, nodding toward the piano. "Does Richard play?" Elena shook her head. "I don't think so, sir. I've never seen him use it," the man chuckled. "Of course not. It's just for show, like half the things in these mansions." He took a champagne flute and moved on. The evening progressed, and the guests were ushered to the dining room for dinner. Elena helped clear glasses from the living room, grateful that her impromptu serving duty would soon be over. She was tired, and her feet ached in ways that made her long for her small but comfortable couch at home. Just as she was about to make her final trip to the kitchen, Hammond's phone rang, the one he had tossed onto the couch earlier. Without thinking, Elena picked it up, intending to bring it to him. The screen showed the caller, Board Chairman. Hammond appeared suddenly in the doorway between the living room and dining room. His face darkened when he saw Elena with his phone. "What are you doing?" he demanded, striding toward her. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, holding out the phone. It was ringing. "I thought you might want to answer it." He snatched it from her hand and rejected the call without a glance. Something about the business call seemed to reignite his earlier bad mood. His jaw tightened as he looked at Elena, really seeing her for perhaps the first time. "How long have you worked here?" he asked abruptly. 3 years, sir." 3 years, he repeated as if the information surprised him. The phone buzzed with a text message, and his expression hardened further as he read it. Behind him, the dinner party continued, laughter and the clink of silverware floating from the dining room. One of the guests appeared in the doorway. "Richard, we're waiting for your toast," called the guest. Hammond's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm coming," he replied, then turned back to Elena. "You know what? I think we need some entertainment tonight." A cold feeling settled in Elena's stomach. Something in his tone made her uneasy. "Follow me," he commanded, walking back toward the dining room. Confused but not daring to disobey, Elena followed him. The dining room fell silent as they entered, curious eyes turning to watch them. The long table gleamed with fine china and crystal, the guests pausing with forks midair. "Friends," Hammond announced, his voice carrying across the room. "Before we continue our excellent meal, I thought we might enjoy some music." He gestured toward the living room, and the guests murmured with interest. Several began to stand, expecting to move back to the other room. "No, please stay seated," Hammond said, his smile growing wider. "The entertainment will come to us." He turned to Elena, who stood awkwardly by his side, still holding her serving tray. "Our talented staff will provide tonight's performance," he declared, taking the tray from her hands and setting it on a side table. The guests exchanged glances, some looking uncomfortable, others curious. Elena felt her cheeks grow hot as all eyes focused on her. "Sir," she whispered, "I don't understand." "The piano," Hammond said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I want you to play something for us." Elena's heart dropped. She stood frozen, aware of the expectant silence that had fallen over the dining room. Some guests looked away, embarrassed by their host's behavior. Others watched with morbid fascination. "I don't," she began. "Come now," Hammond interrupted, his voice carrying a steely edge beneath its false cheerfulness. "Surely you can play something. A little entertainment from the help." In that moment, Elena understood. The failed business call, the rejected phone call from the board chairman, the text message, whatever was happening in Hammond's business world had put him in a mood to assert power over someone. And she was the convenient target. "The piano is this way," Hammond said, gesturing toward the living room with exaggerated courtesy. The message was clear: play or lose your job. With Rosa's college application deadlines approaching and bills due at the end of the week, Elena couldn't afford to be unemployed. She had no choice but to follow him back to the living room, aware of the dinner guests trailing behind them, drinks in hand, curious to see what would happen next. The grand piano waited in the center of the room, its lid raised like a great black wing. Hammond positioned himself beside it, motioning for Elena to sit on the bench. The guests gathered around, forming a semicircle. "Show us what culture you possess," Hammond said. the challenge in his voice unmistakable. He believed he was setting her up for humiliation, a bit of cruel entertainment at the expense of his cleaning lady. Elena looked at the piano keys, gleaming white and black in the chandelier light. Her hands, red from years of harsh cleaning chemicals, hovered uncertainly over them. Behind her, she could hear the whispers of the wealthy guests, could feel their stares, burning into her back. She took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. The weight of everyone's stares pressed down on Elena's shoulders as her fingers rested on the cool piano keys. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain the guests could hear it. She hadn't touched a piano in years, not since that terrible night when everything changed. Richard Hammond stood beside the piano, arms crossed and a smug smile playing on his lips. He clearly expected her to embarrass herself. The wealthy guests shifted uncomfortably, some looking at their shoes, others pretending to be fascinated by their drinks. A few looked genuinely disturbed by the scene unfolding before them. "We're waiting," Hammond said, checking his expensive watch as if he had better things to do. "Just a simple tune will do. Surely even you must know something basic." His words stung, but Elena had endured far worse in her life. She thought of Rosa, her brilliant daughter who deserved every opportunity this world could offer. The college application fees were due this week. The rent was due next week. The thought of Rosa gave her strength. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, letting the room fade away. In her mind, she was back in the small music room of her childhood home, with sunlight streaming through lace curtains and her mother's gentle voice guiding her. "Music comes from the heart first, then the hands," her mother always said. When Elena opened her eyes again, something had changed. Her shoulders relaxed, her posture straightened, and her hands found their position with the muscle memory that never truly disappears. She began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor filled the room, soft, gentle, questioning. The melody flowed from her fingers as naturally as breathing. The piece began with a delicate introduction that soon gave way to deeper, more complex emotions. Hammond's smug smile froze, then slowly faded. He took a step back, his eyebrows drawing together in confusion. The guests, who had been awkwardly avoiding each other's eyes, now turned their full attention to the piano. The quiet conversation stopped. Wine glasses paused halfway to lips, all eyes fixed on Elena's hands as they danced across the keys. As the piece progressed, Elena's body swayed slightly with the music. Her face transformed, the weariness of the long workday melting away, replaced by a serene concentration. The music grew more intense, building toward the powerful middle section of the ballade. Hammond's face had turned an interesting shade of red. He looked around at his guests, trying to gauge their reactions, perhaps hoping someone would share in his discomfort. But his audience was captivated by the unexpected performance. An older gentleman near the back of the room closed his eyes, a look of pure appreciation on his face. A woman with a diamond necklace worth more than Elena's yearly salary discreetly wiped a tear from her cheek. Even the caterers had paused their work, peering around the doorway to listen. As Elena's fingers moved through the complex passages of the piece, her mind traveled back through time. She remembered her first recital at age 7, the national competition she won at 16, and the scholarship to the prestigious conservatory. She remembered the concert halls and the applause. She remembered who she had been before life took a sharp, unexpected turn. The music soared and dipped, telling a story of triumph and loss, of beauty amid struggle. Elena's hands, rough from years of cleaning chemicals, moved with a grace and precision that spoke of thousands of hours of practice and natural talent that couldn't be erased by time or circumstance. One of the dinner guests, a slender man with silver-rimmed glasses, who had been particularly attentive to the performance, leaned toward his companion and whispered something. The companion's eyes widened in surprise, and they both looked back at Elena with newfound interest. Hammond noticed this exchange and shifted uncomfortably. His plan to humiliate the cleaning lady had backfired spectacularly. Instead of providing a moment of cruel entertainment for his guests, he had unwittingly revealed his own ignorance and pettiness. Worse still, he had exposed himself as someone who had failed to recognize extraordinary talent right under his nose for 3 years. As the ballade approached its powerful conclusion, Elena lost herself completely in the music. The room, the guests, Hammond, all faded away. There was only the piano, and the music flowing through her like a river finding its natural path after being dammed for too long. The final notes hung in the air like a question left unanswered. Then silence. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. It was as if the room had collectively held its breath, afraid to break the spell. Then the applause began, hesitant at first, then growing into enthusiastic clapping. Several guests rose to their feet. The older gentleman at the back gave a loud bravo. The woman with the diamond necklace was openly crying now, not bothering to hide her tears. Elena's hands rested in her lap. She felt strangely light, as if a weight she had carried for years had momentarily lifted. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to play, to truly play from the heart. That was... Hammond started, then stopped, clearly at a loss for words. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by confusion and the dawning realization that he had made a terrible mistake. The silver-haired man with glasses approached the piano. "Forgive me," he said, his voice gentle and cultured, "but that was extraordinary. I'm Thomas Chen, director of the City Symphony. I don't believe we've been introduced properly." Elena stood, suddenly conscious again of her serving jacket and her place in this house. "Elena Vasquez," she said simply, extending her hand. Thomas Chen shook it with both of his. "Ms. Vasquez, your interpretation of Chopin is among the finest I've heard. Where did you study?" Before Elena could answer, Hammond stepped between them, his composure somewhat recovered. "Yes, well, I've always had an eye for talent," he said with a forced laugh. "Elena has been with us for quite some time. I often have her play when I'm working." The blatant lie hung awkwardly in the air. Several guests exchanged knowing glances. The woman who had been crying gave Hammond a look of thinly veiled disgust. "Indeed," said Thomas Chen, clearly not believing a word. He turned back to Elena. "Ms. Vasquez, I would very much like to speak with you further. Perhaps after the dinner?" Elena nodded, still somewhat dazed by the turn of events. "Yes, of course," Hammond clapped his hands together. "Well, that was a lovely interlude. Shall we return to our dinner? The main course will be getting cold." The guests began to move back toward the dining room, many of them pausing to compliment Elena on their way. Hammond tried to steer the conversation back to business as they walked, but he had lost his audience. The evening's focus had shifted irrevocably. Elena remained by the piano, her hand resting on its polished surface. The head chef appeared at her side. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. "I had no idea." She gave him a small smile. "Neither did I anymore." "Mr. Hammond wants you to continue serving," the chef said, apologetic. "I told him we could manage without you, but—" Elena nodded. "It's all right." She straightened her serving jacket and followed him to the kitchen. For the remainder of the dinner, Elena moved among the guests with trays of food and drinks. But everything had changed. Now they looked at her, really looked at her. Some smiled warmly as she served them. Others watched her with curious eyes, as if trying to reconcile the cleaning lady in the serving jacket with the masterful pianist they had just witnessed. Thomas Chen caught her eye several times during the meal, nodding encouragingly. Once, when she was clearing his plate, he whispered, "We must talk about your future, Ms. Vasquez." Future. The word echoed in Elena's mind as she worked. For so long, her future had been a narrow path of survival. Work, pay bills, support Rosa, repeat. The idea that there might be something else, something that included music again, was almost too much to hope for. Hammond avoided looking at her for the rest of the evening. His earlier confidence had been replaced by a stiff formality. When he did speak to her, he kept his eyes fixed somewhere over her shoulder, as if afraid to meet her gaze. As the dinner wound down and guests began to leave, Elena overheard snippets of conversation. Never heard anything like it outside of Carnegie Hall. And Hammond had her. Cleaning toilets for 3 years. Criminal. Waste of talent. Hammond's face grew stonier with each comment, his smile more forced. By the time the last guests were collecting their coats, he looked like a man who had swallowed something bitter. Thomas Chen was among the last to leave. He found Elena in the kitchen helping the catering staff clean up. "Ms. Vasquez," he said, "I meant what I said earlier. I would very much like to talk about your playing and perhaps opportunities." Elena dried her hands on a towel. "I haven't played seriously in a long time, Mr. Chen." That performance suggested otherwise, he replied with a kind smile. Talent like yours doesn't simply disappear. Here's my card. Please call me tomorrow. I believe we have much to discuss. Elena took the card, its embossed letters catching the light. Thomas Chen, Artistic Director, City Symphony Orchestra. After he left, Elena finished her work quickly. The catering staff had already heard about her performance and treated her with a new respect, insisting she go home while they completed the cleanup. As she gathered her things to leave, Hammond appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked tired, the earlier anger now replaced by something more complex. "Elena," he said, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "A word before you go." She followed him to his study, a room she usually only entered to dust. He closed the door and gestured for her to sit, something he had never done before. "I think," he said slowly, not meeting her eyes, "that we need to discuss your position here." Elena sat stiffly in the leather chair across from Hammond's massive desk. In 3 years of working in this house, she had never been invited to sit down, much less in this room where important business decisions were made. The study smelled of expensive cologne and old books that lined the walls but showed no signs of being read. Hammond paced behind his desk, hands clasped behind his back. The confident businessman who had tried to humiliate her hours earlier seemed deflated now, uncertain. "I had no idea you could play like that," he finally said, stopping to look at her directly. Elena met his gaze steadily. "You never asked." The simple response hung in the air between them. Hammond had the grace to look away first. "Where did you learn?" he asked, sitting down in his chair. Elena's fingers moved slightly in her lap as if finding invisible piano keys. "I was trained at the National Conservatory in my country. I performed professionally for almost 15 years. Hammond's eyebrows rose. "Professionally? As in concert halls, international tours, recordings?" Elena kept her voice neutral, stating facts without emotion, though inside her heart raced with memories she had tried to bury. "Then how—" Hammond gestured vaguely around them, the question clear. "How did you end up cleaning my house?" Elena considered how much to share with this man who had never before shown interest in her as a human being. But something had shifted tonight, and she sensed that her honesty now might matter. "There was political unrest in my country," she began, choosing her words carefully. "My husband was a journalist who wrote articles critical of the government. When things got bad, we had to leave quickly. Her voice caught slightly. "He didn't make it across the border. I came here with my daughter and very little else." Hammond's face had gone still, the arrogance replaced by something that might have been shame. "My credentials weren't recognized here," Elena continued. "The few recordings I had were left behind. Without proper documentation or connections, I couldn't find work as a musician, but I could clean, and that paid the bills." Hammond nodded slowly, processing this information. "And your daughter?" A small smile touched Elena's lips. "Rosa is brilliant. She graduates high school this year, top of her class. She's applying to universities to study biochemistry." "That's why you stayed," Hammond said, understanding dawning. "Even when I was—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. They both knew how he had treated her. Elena simply nodded. Hammond leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "I owe you an apology, Elena. Not just for tonight, but for 3 years of not seeing you." The apology surprised her almost as much as his invitation to his study had. She hadn't expected it and wasn't sure how to respond. "What will you do now?" Hammond asked, filling the silence. Chen seemed quite impressed. "Will you call him?" Elena touched the business card in her pocket. "I don't know. It's been a long time since music was part of my life in that way. But you've clearly kept practicing somewhere," Hammond said. "That performance tonight wasn't luck or muscle memory. That was mastery." Elena smiled slightly. "The community center near my apartment has an old upright piano. The director lets me use it sometimes when the building is quiet. Just an hour here and there when I can." Hammond looked genuinely astonished. "You maintain that level of skill on an old upright, playing occasionally?" Elena shrugged. "Music isn't just about practice or perfect instruments. It's here." She touched her heart. "Once it's there, it doesn't leave." A silence fell between them, more comfortable than before. Outside the study window, the city lights twinkled against the night sky. "I'm going to be honest with you, Elena," Hammond said finally. "I think it would be best if you didn't continue working here." Though she had half expected this, the words still stung. "I understand," she said, rising from her chair. "I'll collect my things." "No, that's not—" Hammond stood quickly. I meant that you should be playing piano, not cleaning my house. It would be wrong for me to keep you here now that I know what you're capable of. Elena sank back into the chair, surprised again. Mr. Hammond, I need this job. At least until Rosa— I'm not firing you, Hammond interrupted. I'm releasing you to pursue what you were meant to do, with a severance package that should cover your expenses until you get established. Elena stared at him, suspicious of this sudden generosity. Why would you do that? Hammond sighed heavily. Because I made a fool of myself tonight in front of very important people. Because I tried to humiliate you and ended up humiliating myself. Because I've had a wake-up call about how I treat people who work for me. He paused. Take your pick. Before Elena could respond, Hammond opened a drawer and pulled out a checkbook. How much are your daughter's application fees and your rent for the next 3 months? Elena told him, still not quite believing what was happening. Hammond wrote a check, signed it with a flourish, and handed it to her. The amount was significantly more than she had mentioned. This should give you breathing room to see where things go with Chen and the symphony, he said. Consider it back pay for all the times I should have given you a raise and didn't. Elena took the check with trembling fingers. I don't know what to say. Say you'll call Chen tomorrow, Hammond replied, and that you'll send me an invitation to your first performance if there is one. Elena nodded, tucking the check carefully into her pocket alongside the business card. Good, Hammond said, standing again. Now, it's late and I imagine you'd like to get home to your daughter. As Hammond walked her to the door, Elena felt as if she were in a dream. The night had begun with humiliation and might end with a new beginning. Life's melody had taken an unexpected turn. Rosa was still awake when Elena got home despite the late hour. Their small apartment felt warm and welcoming after the tension of the evening. Books and papers were spread across their tiny kitchen table, Rosa's college applications in progress. Mama. Rosa looked up with a smile that faltered when she saw Elena's face. What happened? Did that man do something to you? Elena set down her bag and hung up her coat. It's been a strange night, mijita. She told Rosa everything, the dinner party, Hammond's cruel attempt at humiliation, the moment her fingers touched the piano keys again after so long, the applause, Thomas Chen's business card, and finally, Hammond's unexpected change of heart. Rosa's expressions shifted from anger to pride to amazement as the story unfolded. When Elena showed her the check, Rosa's eyes widened. Is this real? She whispered. Did he really give you this much? Elena nodded. It seems I made quite an impression tonight. Rosa threw her arms around her mother. You're amazing, Mama. I always knew it, but now everyone else will know too. Elena held her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair. It's not that simple, Rosa. Even with Mr. Chen's interest, there's no guarantee. Stop, Rosa pulled back, her young face suddenly serious beyond her years. Don't do that thing where you talk yourself out of opportunities before they even happen. You always tell me to reach for the stars, but you don't let yourself do the same. Elena smiled ruefully. When did you get so wise? I learned from you, Rosa replied, hugging her again. Everything good in me comes from you. That night, Elena lay awake long after Rosa had gone to bed. Her mind replayed the evening's events, her fingers moving slightly on the bedsheet as if playing through Chopin's Ballade again. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to remember who she had been before. Not just a cleaner, not just a struggling single mother, but an artist. A musician whose playing could move people to tears. Tomorrow she would call Thomas Chen. Tomorrow, she would begin to reclaim that part of herself that had been buried but never truly lost. As she drifted toward sleep, Elena wondered what Chen would say when she told him the full story. Would he still be interested when he learned about her past? Would he understand the gaps in her resume? The years spent cleaning instead of performing? Would the symphony's board take a chance on someone with her complicated history? She pushed the worries away. Tomorrow would bring its own melody. Tonight she would rest in the knowledge that she had been seen, truly seen for the first time in years. The next morning, Elena woke early, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with Thomas Chen's business card propped against the sugar bowl. Rosa had already left for school, but she'd written a note. Call him, Mama, today, promise me. Elena smiled at her daughter's determination. Taking a deep breath, she picked up her phone and dialed the number on the card. Mr. Chen? This is Elena Vasquez from last night. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. Yes, the pianist. I was wondering if we could meet to discuss those opportunities you mentioned. She listened, a smile spreading across her face. Today? Yes, I can meet you today. As she hung up, Elena felt a flutter of both excitement and fear. Thomas Chen had sounded genuinely enthusiastic, even more so than he had the night before. He wanted to meet at the Symphony Hall in 2 hours. He had mentioned an upcoming concert series and the possibility of an audition. Elena went to her closet and pushed aside her cleaning uniforms. At the back hung her one good outfit, saved for special occasions like Rose's school events. She took it out, along with the small jewelry box that contained her mother's pearl earrings, the only valuable thing she had managed to bring with her when she fled her homeland. Today wasn't about the past, she decided as she dressed. It wasn't about Richard Hammond or the years spent cleaning his mansion. It wasn't even about the life she had lost. Today was about possibility, about the future, about music finding its way back into her life when she least expected it. Elena pinned up her hair, put on her mother's earrings, and took one last look at herself in the mirror. The woman who gazed back at her stood a little taller, her eyes brighter than they had been in years. Okay, she whispered to her reflection. Let's see where the music takes us now. The Symphony Hall stood tall and proud in the heart of the city, its stone columns reaching toward the sky. Elena paused at the bottom of the wide steps, looking up at the building where she had once dreamed of performing. Her heart fluttered in her chest like a trapped bird. Part of her wanted to turn around, go back to the familiar world of cleaning supplies and invisible work. That world might be hard, but it was safe. It had rules she understood. You can do this, she whispered to herself, echoing the words Rosa had said to her that morning. With a deep breath, Elena climbed the steps. Inside, the grand foyer gleamed with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. A security guard at the desk looked up as she approached. I'm here to see Thomas Chen, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. The guard checked a list. Miss Vasquez? He's expecting you. Go through those doors and down the hall. His office is the third door on the right. Elena nodded her thanks and followed the directions. The hallway was lined with photographs of famous musicians who had performed in the hall over the years. She recognized many of them, pianists whose recordings she had studied, conductors whose interpretations she had admired. Once she might have been among them. She knocked softly on Thomas Chen's door. Come in, called a warm voice. The office was smaller than she expected, cluttered with stacks of sheet music and books. Thomas Chen rose from behind his desk, a genuine smile lighting his face. Ms. Vasquez, thank you for coming. He gestured to a chair. Please sit down. Elena sat, smoothing her skirt nervously. Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Chen. After what I heard last night, I should be thanking you, he said, sitting across from her. Your Chopin was extraordinary, particularly given the circumstances. Elena felt her cheeks warm. It's been a long time since I played for an audience. And yet you performed as if you had never stopped. Chen leaned forward, his eyes kind but searching. Tell me about your training, your background. For the next hour, Elena shared her story, the childhood lessons, the conservatory training, the competitions won, the concerts given. She told him about her career in her home country, the recordings she had made that were probably lost forever now. She explained about her husband's journalism, the hasty escape, the painful years that followed. Chen listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he nodded slowly. A remarkable journey, he said quietly, and a terrible waste of talent these past years. I had no choice, Elena replied. My daughter needed stability, food, a home. Music couldn't provide that for us here. I understand, Chen said, but perhaps that can change now. He pulled a folder from a drawer. We have an opening in our concert series next month. One of our scheduled pianists had to withdraw due to health issues. I'd like you to consider filling that slot. Elena stared at him, stunned. Mr. Chen, I haven't performed professionally in years. I practice on an old upright when I can find the time. And yet you played Chopin's Ballad No. 1 flawlessly last night on a moment's notice, Chen pointed out. Imagine what you could do with proper preparation and a worthy instrument. He slid the folder across the desk. This is the program. Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1. Elena's fingers tingled at the mention of the piece. She had performed it many times in her previous life, had once received a standing ovation for her interpretation in Vienna. The music was still inside her, waiting. "It's too soon," she protested, even as her hand reached for the folder. 4 weeks of intensive rehearsal, Chen said. "We can provide a practice space here at the hall. The orchestra already knows the piece well." He watched her carefully. "The fee would be substantial. Enough to help with your daughter's college expenses, I imagine." Elena opened the folder, her eyes scanning the familiar notes on the page. The music seemed to leap off the paper, calling to her. "Why?" she asked, looking up at Chen. "Why take this chance on me when there must be dozens of established pianists who would jump at this opportunity?" Chen leaned back in his chair. "When I was 10 years old, my family fled China during the Cultural Revolution. My father had been a professor of literature. Here he worked in a restaurant for 15 years. He gestured to a photograph on his desk of an elderly man with kind eyes. Someone took a chance on me when I needed it. Now I have the privilege of doing the same for others." His words touched something deep within Elena. She looked again at the music in the folder, feeling the pull of it like an old friend calling her home. "I would need to discuss this with my daughter," she said finally. Chen smiled. "Of course. But first, would you play something for me? We have a rehearsal piano in the next room. I'd like to hear you in a more appropriate setting than Mr. Hammond's dinner party." Elena followed him to a small rehearsal room where a beautiful Steinway grand piano waited. Unlike Hammond's showpiece, this was a musician's instrument, well used, perfectly maintained, meant for creating art rather than impressing guests. She sat on the bench, adjusting it to her height. The keys felt like silk beneath her fingers as she played a few experimental notes. The piano responded to her touch as if it knew her. "Play whatever moves you," Chen said, taking a seat in the corner. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. Then she began to play Debussy's Clair de Lune, letting the gentle, impressionistic piece flow through her. The music painted moonlight on water, a soft breeze through trees, the quiet beauty of a world at peace. As she played, Elena felt tears prick behind her eyes, not from sadness, but from the pure joy of making music again on an instrument worthy of the sound. When the final notes faded, she kept her hands on the keys, unwilling to break the spell. "Beautiful," Chen said softly. "Absolutely beautiful." Elena looked up, blinking away tears. "I've missed this so much." "It's missed you too," Chen replied. "Music like that doesn't come from technique alone. It comes from living, from suffering, from finding beauty even in dark places." He stood. "Take the folder home. Talk to your daughter, but know that the position is yours if you want it." Rosa was waiting when Elena returned to their apartment, homework forgotten on the table. "Well?" she demanded as soon as Elena walked through the door. "What did he say? What happened?" Elena set down her purse and the folder of music. "He offered me a concert. Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1 with the full orchestra. Next month." Rosa's mouth fell open, then split into a wide grin. She jumped up and threw her arms around her mother. "I knew it. I knew he would see how amazing you are." Elena hugged her daughter back, still processing the reality of the offer. "It's a big commitment, Rosa. Hours of practice every day." "I'm not sure if I'm ready." Rosa pulled back, her young face suddenly serious. "Stop it, Mama. You were born ready for this. You've just forgotten." They sat at the kitchen table as Elena explained everything. The rehearsal schedule, the practice room at the symphony hall, the fee that would indeed help with college expenses. As they talked, Elena's phone buzzed with a text message. "It's from Mr. Hammond," she said, surprised. She read the message aloud. "Heard from Chen. He's very impressed. Let me know the concert date." "I'll be there." Rosa raised her eyebrows. "The same man who tried to humiliate you yesterday?" "People can surprise you," Elena said, setting down the phone. Sometimes it takes a shock to make someone see clearly. Later that evening, after Rosa had gone to bed, Elena sat alone with the folder of music. She turned the pages slowly, memories flooding back with each familiar passage. Her fingers moved in the air, playing ghost notes above the paper. Could she really do this? Step back into that world after so long away? The doubts crept in like shadows. She was older now, out of practice, unknown in this country's music scene. What if she failed? What if the magic she had shown at Hammond's house was just a fluke, a moment of lucky inspiration? But beneath the doubts, a stronger current pulled her forward. The feeling of the piano keys beneath her fingers today, the sound of the music filling the rehearsal room, the joy that had flowed through her as she played, these were real. These were true. These were hers to reclaim. Elena picked up her phone and typed a message to Thomas Chen. I accept your offer. When do we begin? His reply came almost instantly. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. piano waiting for you. She sent one more message before going to bed. Thank you for the second chance. His response was simple. Music is always about second chances. Sleep well, Maestro. Elena smiled at the title Maestro. Once it had been a normal part of her life. Now it felt both foreign and familiar, like returning to a hometown after many years away. Different, yet somehow still home. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter. There would be challenges, doubts, moments of fear. But there would also be music. Her music. The thought carried her into sleep. Her dreams filled with Tchaikovsky's sweeping melodies and the sound of applause not heard in years. The 4 weeks leading up to the concert passed in a blur of practice, rehearsals, and rediscovery. Elena spent hours each day at the symphony hall, her fingers dancing across the keys as she reawakened muscles that had grown stiff from years of scrubbing floors instead of playing concertos. Some days were triumphant, the music flowing through her as naturally as breathing. Other days were humbling, her technique rusty, her confidence wavering. Thomas Chen proved to be both a demanding director and a compassionate mentor. He pushed Elena hard, expecting excellence, but he also understood her unique situation. Your hands need time to remember, he told her after a particularly frustrating rehearsal, but they will remember. Trust them. At home, Rosa became the practical one, cooking dinner when Elena was too tired, quizzing her mother on passages that needed work, and fiercely protecting her practice time. No, she can't come to the phone right now. Elena once overheard Rosa telling a neighbor, My mother is preparing for her concert with the symphony. Can she call you back next month? The pride in her daughter's voice warmed Elena's heart more than any applause ever could. News of the cleaning lady pianist spread quickly through the city's cultural circles. A local reporter caught wind of the story and called to request an interview. Elena hesitated, but Chen encouraged her to accept. Your story might inspire others who have put their dreams aside, he said. Besides, it will help fill seats for the concert. The article appeared in the Sunday Arts section. From cleaning houses to concert hall, the remarkable journey of Elena Vasquez. The writer painted a respectful portrait of Elena's past achievements, her flight from political persecution, and her unexpected return to music after years of manual labor. The piece included quotes from Thomas, Chen praising her extraordinary talent and resilience, and mentioned the upcoming performance. What the article didn't mention was the fear that still gripped Elena some nights when she lay awake, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. What if she froze on stage? What if the years away from serious performance had damaged her abilities beyond repair? What if the audience saw only a cleaning lady pretending to be an artist? 3 days before the concert, disaster struck. Elena woke with her right hand cramped into a painful claw. Years of harsh cleaning chemicals and repetitive motions had taken their toll. And now, at the worst possible moment, her body was rebelling. I can't play, she told Chen in his office, fighting back tears as she tried to flex her stiff fingers. I've pushed too hard, too fast. Chen examined her hand carefully. We need to get you to a doctor, he said, already reaching for his phone. This looks like tendinitis, possibly carpal tunnel. Common for pianists, actually. The specialist confirmed Chen's suspicion. Overuse combined with years of work-related strain, she explained, gently manipulating Elena's hand. We can treat it, but you need rest. I have a concert in 3 days, Elena said desperately. I can't rest. The doctor looked skeptical but prescribed anti-inflammatory medication, a brace for sleeping and specific exercises. And limit your practice to short sessions with plenty of breaks, she added firmly. Back at the symphony hall, Chen called an emergency meeting with the orchestra manager and the publicity team. We should postpone, the manager said, looking worried. Find a replacement. No, Elena protested. I can do this. I just need to be smarter about how I practice. Chen studied her determined face. 2 hours a day maximum, he said finally. No more. We'll have the orchestra rehearse the sections where you'll need the most support, and we'll have our staff pianist on standby just in case. For the next 3 days, Elena practiced with the brace on, removing it only for her carefully timed sessions at the piano. She worked with cold packs, pain relievers, and sheer determination. Each night, Rosa helped her with the hand exercises, both of them silent with worry but refusing to voice their fears. The night before the concert, Elena received a surprising text from Richard Hammond. Bought front row tickets for tomorrow. The entire board of my company will be there. No pressure. You'll be magnificent. She showed the message to Rosa, who rolled her eyes. Is he trying to be supportive or make you nervous? Both probably, Elena said with a small smile. He's still learning how to be a decent human being. That night, Elena dreamed of her husband. In the dream, he sat beside her on the piano bench, his journalist's notebook in hand, smiling as she played. Tell our story through the music, he said before fading away. She woke with tears on her cheeks but a strange sense of peace in her heart. Concert day dawned bright and clear. Elena arrived at the symphony hall hours early, her hand feeling better than it had in days. As she walked through the stage door, she was greeted by a sight that stopped her in her tracks. A massive bouquet of white roses with a card that read, "To the maestro who cleans up beautifully on and off the stage. Break a leg. Rach, your former employer has an interesting way of showing support," Chen commented, appearing beside her. Elena touched a velvety petal. He's trying. That's something. As the afternoon progressed, Elena went through her warm-up routine, carefully testing her hand. The stiffness was there but manageable. The pain had subsided to a dull ache that she could work through. She changed into the concert dress that Chen's wife had helped her select. A simple, elegant black gown that made her look every inch the professional pianist she once had been. In the dressing room, she pinned her mother's pearl earrings in place and studied her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked both familiar and strange. Part of her past self returned, but with new lines of experience etched into her face, new wisdom in her eyes. A knock at the door broke her reverie. 15 minutes, Ms. Vasquez, called the stage manager. Elena took a deep breath. I'm ready. She found Rosa waiting in the wings, dressed in her best clothes, eyes shining with excitement and pride. You look like a star, Mama, she whispered, hugging Elena carefully. I feel like I might throw up, Elena admitted with a nervous laugh. Rosa squeezed her hand. Remember what you always tell me before tests? Just do your best. The rest will take care of itself. Hearing her own advice reflected back to her, Elena smiled. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best, Rosa replied, kissing her cheek. Now go show them what music really sounds like. Chen appeared, already in his conductor's tails. It's time, he said gently. The house is full. Elena nodded, took another deep breath, and followed him toward the stage. As she waited for her cue, she peered through the curtain at the packed concert hall. She could see Hammond and his associates in the front row as promised. Behind them, row after row of strangers who had come to hear her play. Some perhaps drawn by curiosity about the cleaning lady, pianist, others by genuine love of music. The orchestra began filing onto the stage to polite applause. Chen gave Elena one last encouraging nod before stepping out to take his place at the podium. The audience applauded more enthusiastically for him. Then came the moment she had both longed for and dreaded. Chen gestured toward the wings, and the concertmaster nodded in her direction. Elena stepped onto the stage. The applause that greeted her was warm and welcoming. She acknowledged it with a graceful bow, then moved to the gleaming grand piano at center stage. As she settled onto the bench, adjusting it slightly, she caught Hammond's eye in the front row. He gave her a small nod that contained a world of meaning, respect, apology, encouragement. The hall fell silent. Chen raised his baton. The orchestra drew a collective breath, and then the music began. The famous opening chords of Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1 thundered from Elena's fingers, bold and confident. When the main theme emerged from the orchestra, her heart soared with it. The pain in her hand faded to background noise as she lost herself in the music she had first learned decades ago in another life. There was a moment, midway through the first movement, when Elena felt something shift inside her. The years of doubt and hardship seemed to fall away. She was not the cleaning lady playing at being a concert pianist. She was not the refugee clinging to fragments of her past. She was simply Elena, the musician she had always been, even when circumstances had forced that part of her into hiding. The music poured through her with a new freedom. Her interpretation was different now than it had been in her youth, deeper, more nuanced, informed by loss and struggle, but also by resilience and hope. The orchestra responded to her playing, matching her energy, supporting her vision of the piece. When the final triumphant chords of the third movement rang out, Elena's hands lifted from the keys with a sense of completion. For a heartbeat, the hall was completely silent, that magical moment of collective breath-holding after a powerful performance. Then the audience erupted. People rose to their feet, applauding wildly. Elena stood, slightly dazed by the wall of sound directed at her. She bowed deeply to the audience, then turned to acknowledge the orchestra. Chen was beaming as he shook her hand, then pulled her into a quick, congratulatory embrace. As the applause continued, Elena searched the crowd until she found Rosa, standing in the wings with tears streaming down her face and the biggest smile Elena had ever seen. Next to her stood the unlikely figure of Richard Hammond, clapping as enthusiastically as everyone else, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine admiration. Elena took another bow. Flowers were presented, and eventually, she made her way off stage on shaking legs. Rosa threw her arms around her mother. "You did it, Mama. You were incredible." Over Rosa's shoulder, Elena saw Hammond hovering awkwardly nearby. She gently disengaged from her daughter and approached him. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. Hammond shook his head. "No, thank you. For showing me what true talent looks like. For reminding me that people are more than their jobs." He paused. "And for giving me a much-needed lesson in humility." "Everyone deserves a second chance," Elena replied with a small smile. Later that night, after the post-concert reception, after the critics had praised her triumphant return to the stage, and Chen had offered her 3 more concerts in the upcoming season, Elena and Rosa finally returned to their small apartment. "What happens now, Mama?" Rosa asked as they kicked off their fancy shoes and collapsed onto the couch. Elena looked around their humble home, thinking of the journey that had brought her here and the new path opening before her. "Now," she said, taking her daughter's hand, "we keep moving forward. You with your studies, me with my music. Different from what we planned, perhaps, but still beautiful. Like a new melody," Rosa suggested. Elena smiled. "Exactly like that. A new melody built on old themes. Struggle and sacrifice, yes, but also talent and determination. And most importantly, love." Outside their window, the city lights twinkled like distant applause, celebrating not just one night's performance but the courage to begin again, to reclaim a silenced voice, to play on despite everything.